You're watching CHCO-TV's gavel-to-gavel coverage of the September 11, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting and Special Council meeting for the Municipal District of St. Stephen. I'm Florence Mitchell. The Committee of the Whole meeting begins with a presentation by Herb and Linda Duplessis for a tennis court. Under new business, committee will discuss a request for municipal consent by Galway Metals. Councillor Heislip will provide an update on the world's oldest basketball court, and Mayor McEachern and Director of Community Services Kev Sumner will provide a community safety update. Finally, the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission will make a presentation on a planning bylaw update. In the special council meeting, council will move to enter into the 3-municipality Economic Development Partnership Agreement, subject to approval by the other 2 municipalities. Council will also move to proceed with the offer of services outlined by Dillon Consulting Limited for the Budd Avenue extension. Now let's join committee in the Moosehead Room at the Garceland Civic Center in St. Stephen.
All right, this is the Municipal District of St. Stephen Committee of the Whole meeting agenda, Wednesday, September 11th, 2024 at 6 p.m.-ish. Call to order. And before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are gathered today on ancestral unceded territory of the Passamaquoddy people. Next up, I need a mover and seconder for the agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting, September 11th, that's a typo, 2024 be approved.
I so move.
Councilor Eastman, Councilor Cornish, any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, any conflicts of interest this evening? Seeing none? All right, next up, I need a mover and second for the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on August 14th, 2024 be approved as presented. Councilor Heislip, Councilor Wright, sorry about that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you for the approval. Okay. Herb and Linda, public delegation for the tennis court presentation. The floor is yours whenever you're ready. You're usually following Herb. What's going on?
Have been for 42 years, Mr. Mayor, and happily so.
Okay.
Good evening, Your Worship, councilors, staff. My name's Herb Duplessis. This is my lovely wife, Linda. We're longtime tennis players and residents of Milltown. I'm sure you know we're here to ask you for something. This presentation will provide context for our requests and help you reach, we hope, an informed decision.
Okay, from the 19th century, when people gathered in the Milltown Park to hear performances from the bandstand, erected in memory of Winsor Low Dewar, in the mid-20th century, when veterans gathered to dedicate the park and monument to the brave lads who gave their lives overseas, to the 21st century, when Donald W. Moffat's family placed the memorial bench near the tennis courts because that's where he spent many years of his life enjoying the game. The park and its courts have been at the heart of Milltowners' lives. Alex Armstrong recalls as a Depression-era child playing every sport in Milltown in the parks, especially tennis. John Healy, a contemporary of Reed Haley, recalls racing down the hill to Stedman's in St. Stephen to buy a new tennis racket. Amalgamation in the 1970s created the town of St. Stephen-Milltown, but over time it became simply the town of St. Stephen. The newly created governing body failed to include the Milltown Memorial Tennis Courts in its community improvement plans. The court slowly deteriorated and Herb and Reed became known as road runners because no distance was too far for them to play on well-maintained courts. With my encouragement and the support of our good buddy Reed, once Herb retired from the classroom in 2001, he met with then Mayor Bob Brown and Deputy Mayor Al Corbett to discuss a vision for restoring the courts. They suggested that he make a presentation to the full council.
I'm wondering why the slides aren't changing.
You can start them. Go ahead, you can start them now. It's,
I can advance them for you, that's no problem.
they were set for a time. As soon as you started them, they were to advance
They should have
automatically.
advanced automatically.
Well, go ahead, say your part, and then they'll,
Well, we should be at slide 9.
okay, start there.
After hearing the report and agreeing in principle, it would take another 3 years before a newly elected council approved a 2-year phased approach to restoring the courts. Councillor Harding, then Miller, was an ardent advocate, and we thank her.
By late August 2006, the courts were open for play, and in July of 2007, Reed and Herb were now Tennis Canada certified coaches. Along with me, we volunteered our time to run a 1-week tennis camp for youth under the town's Parks and Recreation summer programming. We also offered weekly evening drop-in tennis for adults, became active volunteer caretakers for the courts, the bandstand, and the park area. We made annual reports to council and/or the Parks and Rec director, who at the time was Mike O'Connell. The professionals who worked on these courts also made recommendations on how to care for them and said, if the town adhered to the recommendations, the courts would continue to be admired by the communities on both sides of the border.
During the budget hearings in 2010, a strong recommendation from Playtech to address emerging hairline cracks and apply new plexipave was approved. In July of 2011, we got our second lesson on court care and repair.
We joyfully volunteered our time and were excited when we were asked to be part of Chocolate Fest, but there were bitter times too. As councilors, mayors, and CAOs came and went, and budgeting for proper maintenance of the tennis courts was deferred beyond the recommended time frame. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. New staffing in 2019, a new CAO and a new community services director meant we were once again making our case with history lessons, photos, and other forms of documentation. You have a streamlined timeline and full PowerPoint slides attesting to the ups and downs, steps and missteps, action and inaction that brought the tennis courts to the deteriorating condition that we see today.
Over the years, interest in racket sports has grown, not only through tennis, but also through pickleball. Only COVID in 2020 could put a full stop to recreation. However, as soon as Tennis Canada and Tennis New Brunswick issued return to safe play guidelines, we Roadrunners began meeting with friends and family bubbles for tennis instruction. Looking at the deteriorating court condition, we now fear it may put a stop to safe play.
Tennis programming, as Herb said, was suspended for almost 4 full years through Parks and Rec. And it returned to the multi-sport summer programming this year with the aquatic staff, who had to add a second time slot because the interest was so great. Eugene O'Neill once said, "There is no present or future, only the past happening over and over and over again now."
Which brings us to now. And I will tell you, we were more than a little uncomfortable making this presentation. We were afraid it would seem as if we were looking for praise or recognition. I can assure you that is not the case. To summarize, tennis has been part of the history of Milltown for 100 years. The Milltown Memorial Courts are used on an almost daily basis. Users who have no other access to recreation can walk to the courts. The Milltown Memorial Courts have been allowed to deteriorate to the point where they may soon be unplayable. We hasten to add that we are neither engineers nor contractors, but we can provide materials regarding the repair and construction of outdoor sport courts.
On behalf of the many families who use the tennis courts for both tennis and pickleball, we're imploring you to engage a reputable engineer tennis court contractor. H.W. McLean & Sons is who we would recommend, to assess the site and make recommendations as to remediation and cost. And based upon those recommendations, establish and commit to a funding schedule that will restore the courts to their 2006-2007 condition, with lines on the bandstand courts for tennis and pickleball. This will have the added advantage of allowing families who do not have easy access to your planned pickleball court near the Legion to continue to play this fastest-growing racket sport in North America.
Your Worship, when you were questioned as to why the municipality was paving walking trails instead of repairing streets, you replied, "Walking trails pave streets." I suggest tennis courts pave streets too.
So we thank you for your time, and if you have questions, we'll try to address them. And we also want to thank the many people who came to support us as we made this presentation. These are some of the many users of the Milltown Memorial Courts. And some of the children that also use them are engaged right now in practicing for swimming and some other sports that they participate in.
You may notice the sad little tennis ball there.
Yeah. So, any questions?
Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. I'm sitting here nodding the whole time because I've brought these things up, and I'm also a user of that tennis courts, and I found myself more going outside of our community to play the sport than staying in the community, because it's just the facility is not there, and it's and I said that if something's not happened, it's going to be unplayable probably within the next year or so. I mean, I have to go to Eastport to go and play on Sundays, and I go to St. George on Tuesdays and Thursdays now because it's just.
In other words, you're becoming a road runner yourself.
I'm becoming a road runner myself, and there's 2 or 3 of us that are doing the same thing, and you provide the facilities like they do in St. George. They have eight courts there. I've seen up to times that all 8 of them have been in use with 4 people in each court and 4 or 6 people waiting. Tournaments I've gone to, just basic tournaments, are 300 people come into your community for one day, and it's happening in St. John and Fredericton probably bi-weekly or monthly, I guess, probably, the tournaments. So that brings in a lot of people in the community. And, we're talking about youth at risk and everything like that. And we've seen some of those people in the bandstand that stay there, and they're talking and say, hey, you want to come down and play? And we've done that before. And some of them have actually come down to try the sport or said no, and they leave because they feel uncomfortable. So that's the benefits, I think.
Councillor Heislip, at another meeting, you talked about a section of the court that was pushing upward. And if you look through your copies of the slideshow, you're going to see one, it's in 2011 when the hairline cracks, all the little white spots that you see, those were where hairline cracks were filled in. And you see this one large patch where the Herb put a tennis racket down and a can of balls, just for perspective. That's the section that you were talking about. There's ledge under there. And when moisture gets down even beneath the surface, it lifts. They remediated all that and fixed it. And it's starting again because the cracks were allowed, the repairs weren't done. And so.
We actually put a 10-foot level on top of those waves. Some of them are 2 and 3 centimeters above grade.
Yeah. Yeah. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for everything you're doing and for your support group. Okay. New business, we get Galloway Metals presentation. Are they going to be online, are they, or are they? Oh, they're right here. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Jeff, does the mouse do anything? No? Okay. I thought I might be able to advance the slideshow, but. I'd like to thank Council for inviting us here to provide some more information on our request for mineral exploration activities within the municipality. I know this is all new for you, along with probably a bunch of other items since the new amalgamations of the municipal reform that the provincial government has done. So I imagine a lot of municipalities are going through the same things as you guys are. So we're Galloway Metals. We're a gold and base metal exploration company. We have two main projects. One's in Charlotte County, which we call the Clarence Stream Gold Project. And we have another one in Quebec called the Estrades Polymetallic Project. Estrades Polymetallic. It's a copper, lead, zinc mine in northwestern Quebec, or former mine. You can advance. All right, so a little summary. I'm just going to go over, what mineral exploration looks like in New Brunswick from the government surveys, the claim map showing the current claims that are staked in the municipality of St. Stephen, our area of interest that we put the application in for to you guys. Also going to go over the mineral exploration permitting procedures from the provincial government. The standards and conditions of mineral exploration, the notice of planned exploration work within municipal boundaries, one you guys have just provided me a few weeks ago, and then I'll just be going over, what diamond drilling looks like, the equipment, what a site looks like, and what happens on the site. So the map on your right is a geology map. With some drill holes would be the black circles, and mineral occurrences that are the yellow stars. So a mineral occurrence is just prospectors going out with their rock hammer in the field, chipping rocks and looking at it, and they might find a little bit of copper mineralization or nickel or gold. And then that would be right in your bedrock or outcrops. And so they kind of tag all those. They could be, most of these are very minor, just minor little, little veins and stuff. And some of them, could become fairly significant occurrences. So the little historical drill sites, you see there's actually quite a few in the new boundary of St. Stephen. Most of them are actually just north of the old town limits, and that would have been called the St. Stephen nickel deposits. So there's a significant nickel discovery there that dates back to 1958, I believe the first drill hole is. So just to get there, the government has a geological survey branch, and they send people out in the field, walking up brooks, looking at the highway cuts, and they record what the rock types are and do some structural measurements, and they produce the map that you see on the right with all the different colors. All the colors are just different units. Pinks are granites, the grays and kind of gray blues are sediments, the purple ones are what would be a gabbro or black granite, some people like to call it. And then they also do what's a regional till survey throughout the entire province. So that's been ongoing for years. And they take a sample of the glacial till, which is the compact sediment right on top of the bedrock. And it can be almost as hard as cement, the basal tills. And what they do, they'll send those off, and every sample's like on a 2-kilometer grid, so one sample every 2 kilometers, and they try to make it a grid. And they send those samples off to a lab, and they analyze them for about 35 to 45 different elements. So copper, lead, zinc, gold, nickel, lithium, cobalt, a whole suite of metals. And then with all those data points, you can see where there's concentrations of different metals. So just north of St. Stephen, there'd be a really high nickel and till, and that would be this, representing the St. Stephen nickel. Other places there's high gold, high lithium, various anomalies in different places. So that's when the prospectors get those maps. They go out with their hammers and try to find those types of mineralization. And then after the prospectors, maybe find it, then a junior exploration company, like who I work for, will go out and they'll do additional soil surveys. So instead of soil samples on a 2-kilometer grid, we'll take them every 25 meters on 100-meter spaced lines to try to narrow down where that's actually coming from. And then we may fly some geophysics, which could be on a plane or a helicopter, and they have a little tool and it'll measure the magnetics of the rocks, and those produce different anomalies we follow up. I know this is, most of this, you're not gonna be familiar with, but that's kind of how we get there. And then if we do find an area of interest, we'll want to actually get down to the rock. So most of New Brunswick has a soil cover on it, so we'll either have to dig it up with an excavator and get down to the rock so we can actually see it, or we can do it through diamond drilling, which is you make a little drill pad, and I sent a little piece of drill core around. That would be a piece of granite. So that's the size of the holes we drill, and it'll be anywhere from a 50-meter hole, down to 300-400 meters. So right now there's 202 historical drill holes since 1958 within your municipal boundary. And in our area of interest, you can see is just that black box up to the north. So that's right along your northern boundary, northeastern boundary.
Just to point that out, I think that's Moores Mills Lake right there to the left of that.
Yeah, so it's just off of St. David's Ridge Road, and more specifically off the Glendenning Road. Yeah, and then we're off a private road in there.
That lake looked familiar, so I was trying to get the boundaries, and everybody will recognize it from where the lake is, right? So
yeah, and I think the bigger lake to the left is Gallup Lake, maybe? Yeah.
just above it.
Yeah. So it's just kind of how, the review of St. Stephen's geology and background in mineral exploration. Can you do, Jeff? So this is a claim map. You can see your boundary in yellow with the red border. That's your new boundary. And our area of interest again. And all the different colored blocks, you can see Galway Metals, we have the claims to the northeastern part of your municipal boundary. And then there's Brunswick Exploration in the center. Ryan Colt has some of the central and eastern parts. Vision Lithium is who owns that St. Stephen nickel area. And then there's a few other local prospectors that have ground. And then anything you don't see a block with a number, that's open ground, that would be open for staking. So anybody can get their prospecting license in New Brunswick and go online on the NBE claims application and stake some ground and begin your prospecting careers. So this is a ortho photo of the area of interest. So you see St. David's Ridge Road on the left, Glendenning Road that goes along the bottom, and the private road that runs north off Glendenning. The blue circles are our proposed drill sites, and the yellow lines are just showing the nearest houses or camps. So the closest one would be a camp 900 meters away, and then there's another little camp that's 975 meters away, and the closest house is 950 meters away. You can see 2 historical drill holes in yellow on the right-hand side. Those were drilled in 1980, and just showing you that there has been work done in this area before. What I'm used to do is, and most people in my industry, so the provincial government regulates the mineral exploration for the province. So they have a Form 18, which is similar to the form that you guys have recently developed. So it's a notice of planned work on private land. If we're on Crown lands, it's a Form 18.1. And we need to get permission from the landowner, the private landowner, and permission from the mining recorder before we do our work. So we usually hand deliver these if possible, but some people do own properties that live away. There's some people that live out in BC, but they have a woodlot still here in New Brunswick. So we try to get a hold of them, knock on their door if we can. It's hard to find phone numbers these days in the age of cell phones. So you pretty much got to find their address through SNB's Planet system. So that's how we get the information of who owns what plot of land. And then we'll go track these down. Hopefully we can knock on the door and actually just have a face-to-face talk with them. And if we can't do that, we will mail it to their address. So the government departments that reviewed the application is Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development. So the Resource Development Branch, that would be where the mining recorder works. And then there's the Crown Lands Branch, which wouldn't pertain to this application because we're not on Crown Lands. And then the Forest Planning and Stewardship Branch also reviewed the application. Then it also goes to Tourism, Heritage, and Culture, most specifically the Archaeology and Heritage Branch. So we have to report any archaeological finds on our sites. And usually if you're within, if you're close within 30 to 80 meters from a water course, they usually may want you to do an advanced archaeology study before you go ahead and do your work. So we got to get permission from all those departments. If it all passes, they give us their okay to do our work. And then now that we do want to do some work within the new municipal boundary, we have to notify you guys with your notice of planned exploration work. This is the standard conditions for mineral exploration. I sent this to Celeste. It's a longer document than this, but it just shows some of the regulations we have to abide by that the provincial government has come up with. So drilling within 500 meters of a groundwater supply well. So we have to notify all of the landowners within 500 meters if they have a groundwater supply well. So we have done that a number of occasions. So in that case, we have to go, before we do any work, we go and test your well. We send that off for a metals test. So a lot of people do, you test your well. A lot of people just do your bacteria and sediment. That's kind of the main one people do. So is there E. coli in your water? But everybody should be doing the metals one as well. So that'll give you your metal content in your water, whether there's lead in your water, arsenic, lead, zinc, any of those metals. If there's too high of a concentration, they'll let you know. So we go in before we do any work, and then once we complete our work, we'll go in after and test them as well and see if their water table changed at all. Also, when we drill within 500 meters of ground supply well, we have to seal the hole. And what you do is you put bentonite clay down the hole. It's an expanding clay that's impermeable, and that seals the hole. So it'd be better than concrete. It's a waterproofing mineral. So that's what we do if we are close to houses or wells. That's the process the government put in place for us to abide by. And then there's other rules, how close your drill pump station is from a water, and a bunch of other, you guys can maybe read up a little bit more in detail on that. There's also conditions for trenching, fording streams, and whatnot. So what does diamond drilling look like? So the equipment they use, so they have a small bulldozer. This one here is a John Deere 700. A water pump. We need the water to cool down the drill bit. So the water cools the bit so it doesn't kind of get stuck in the rock. And then there's a drill rig and a drill rod sled just to carry their equipment. So, and these pictures were taken yesterday. Yeah, so I went in the field yesterday to grab these pictures. It was a short notice to put this presentation together, but I'm like, I just want you to see what a site looks like. So this is a current site that we're drilling on right now. There's the drill rig, there's the drill rod, sled, and truck. You notice the big trees that are still around there. So, we're not a forestry company. We don't want to cut any trees down. So we'll use all existing trails, even if it's a four-wheeler trail, we'll try to upgrade it just enough to get our equipment down. If there's open sites, we'll try to use an open site where there's no merchantable wood. Because it's a lot of work for us. We're not a forestry company. It takes a lot of work to cut those big trees down, and we want to leave them there to be, you know, harvested by the forestry companies or enjoyed by the private landowners. So we try to keep as many of them around as possible and do as little as impact, because, you know, that's just more work for us. And we're not into cutting trees, we're into drilling rock. So this is a drone photo of that same setup. So you can kind of see the trucks kind of on the left pointing to the right. So a typical site is about the size of 4 to 6 half-ton trucks can kind of fit on a little site. And so this would be a drill site after 1 week of drilling. So all the equipment's moved off, my truck's there for scale. And, you know, it's a fairly small little pad in the woods. Another site, about a year after drilling, you can see the green grass growing. So after we're done drilling a site, we'll put seeding hay all around the site. And what that does, it helps encourage growth. So usually within the next year, that good seeding hay will grow, and it'll grow, you know, sometimes I've seen it up over my head, how well that stuff grows. And then, you know, every winter that'll die down and start building that organic layer back. So this is just a close-up picture of some drill sites that we have close to that drill rig. You can see the grass is growing really nice, you know, from our reclamation job with reseeding the hay. We also try to recontour the sites to the original, you know, if there was a little hill or something we had to plow, we'll try to recontour it to its original state. And just if you go back just for a sec, so you see that drill casing. So a drill casing's 88.9 millimeters. The drill core, which you guys seen, that's 44.7. And your typical home water well is 152 millimeters. So the holes we drill are about half the size of a typical water well at a rural house. And so that's what the drill core looks like. So they take every 3 meters, they bring up the drill core that they just drilled, they put it in a box, nice and neat, and those go back to the geologist to log, and they'll sample some of that. So anything they think that has mineralization in it, they'll saw it in half. Half goes to the lab for analysis to tell you what metals are in it, and half stays in the box for reference. And yeah, so that's just a kind of summary of what we just went over. And well, thank you very much for your time. I'm sure you may have questions.
I'll let you guys go first. Go ahead. Earl or Councilor Eastman.
What's the ruling around drilling by a fault line?
No, there's no concerns. We drill faults all the time. Yeah. So there's different types of faults. There's big regional faults, which I think the one I did watch the meeting. I wasn't able to attend on the Wednesday. But yeah, so the fault you would be probably referring to is called the Oak Bay Fault in the geology world, and that kind of runs north-south. And that would be like a bigger, wider regional fault. And then, but there's always tons of these small little faults within the ground too. We drill through them all the time. And there's different classifications of faults. Some of them are healed faults, some of them are like gougy faults, so it'll be like almost like a clay inside. But yeah, there's no rules. I've been drilling many faults for years, and there is no rules for drilling around faults or any concerns that I know about either. Yeah.
So drilling these small holes, and you're sampling the water before and after to note changes. So what would you expect might possibly happen? What's the risk? What are you measuring by checking the water after?
Well, we're measuring all the metal content. So like I said, there's about 40 different metals they test for. And we're just making sure that if we do go through an aquifer, that the water's not going from one to the other. So that's why we will bentonite the holes. If we do encounter artesian flows anywhere, those holes are bentonited top to bottom. When you're within 500 meters of a water well, even if you don't encounter water, you still bentonite it.
Yeah. So if you took a sample post drilling and you all of a sudden noticed there was arsenic in it now, or there was an increased level of something, what would the process be?
So we notify the mining recorder and the landowner get copies of the reports both before and after. So as soon as we get the results back from the lab, it goes, one copy goes to the private landowner, another copy goes to the mining recorder. And then same with after. When we get the results after, we compare it to what's before and make sure there's no significant changes. So far, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen a significant change in the water. So, yeah. And we've also found too is like some people haven't done their metals before, and when we do that metal test before, their water is already not drinkable. You know, it might be too much arsenic or too much lead in there, and that's just naturally occurring in the ground, right? So before anyone's done work, it's some of the wells are, but a lot of them do know that, like a lot of these rural people, they will do both tests. It's recommended to do both. And they'll be like, I've gone to houses and they're like, oh yeah, our water's no good. We're like, we still need to test it just to make sure there's no change. Yeah.
Councilor Rodas?
This is more of a personal question, but how did you get into this field? How did you start in this career? And I'm just curious for students, you know, who might be trying to think about what they want to do after school. And it does seem to be a unique field, and it does seem to have a lot of different diverse pieces to it, whether it's working with the government, working in the environment. So maybe just give me a little insight.
In high school, I knew nothing about the field, even though my father worked at security at Heath Steel Mines. It's not in your education program, you know, like a lot of K to 12, there's not a whole lot of introduction to mineral exploration or geology or any of that. So I went to university and I thought I was going to be a biologist. And then I got a D in first semester biology and couldn't take the second semester, so I had to fill that time slot, and I filled it with geology. And I got really good marks in that, so I'm like, oh, maybe I should look at some more geology courses. You know, second year I passed that biology course and got that over with, and yeah, so just kind of by luck I had to fill a slot in university, and you know, it piqued my interest. Like there's courses on earthquakes and all different sorts of things, and geology is a wide spectrum, right? There's from hydrogeology, the water tables, to you know, mineral exploration. You know, astronauts, UMB, we have a NASA lab. So, you know, it's like everything on Earth and everything in the universe. So it could take you anywhere, actually. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting. So they're trying to do more outreach like this. So if anyone was able to attend the Sussex Balloon Fiesta this year, or the past 3 years, there's a geology tent there. So you got people from UNB, you got people from the Department of Natural Resources, and they're all just trying to educate people about this field because not many people know about it. Yeah, I just stumbled upon it myself, and yeah, I loved it. Like, it's taken me all across this country. You know, I've gotten to go to Northwest Territories, Yukon, Nunavut. Yeah, it's really exciting. You know, got a lot of helicopter rides.
You can see your passion in it, actually. I'd like to get you around bonfire some night probably take quite a few nights before I get what you're talking about. But anyway, you know, it sounds interesting.
I can definitely go overtime.
Yeah.
So.
So that's what we're here for. Councilor Greenlaw.
So when you're doing the core drilling, if you do punch a hole in an aquifer that was potable prior to, and you introduce something to it, then what?
I don't know, because it's never happened. So then I think we need to go talk to the provincial government. They probably know that answer. But so far ever since I've been working, I've never encountered it. Obviously, you would first you'd notify the property owner immediately, and then from there we'd have to see, you know, what does happen. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the education on this. And so the one that we're doing right now is one parcel, one landowner, is it? Yes. So that makes it easier for us this evening. It's just, I just like to, the reason I wanted to see this when I was on the fence, I wanted to kind of go through the process as, you know, as we're doing right now, whether it's one owner or not. And
It's now like with this new e-claims, and they just developed a couple more things that you have to do notify. So if someone stakes claims right now in your municipality, you have to notify the landowners that you staked their land within 30 days. And then you also send a pamphlet of landowner rights. So all the landowners have certain rights, and so they get that pamphlet as well. And and most of the time, we're just on a map where we look at the geology. We don't actually look at who owns what landowners are where. It's like that kind of geology might have this type of deposit. So we're looking at the geology map, not the landowner map, when we initially stake it. Yeah, then that's like, yeah. And when you stake it, the government actually sends you all the PID numbers, so your property identification numbers. They send us the entire list and a map, and then those are the ones we have to send out a notification to all the people that their land has been staked. Yeah.
sure, Councilor Cornish?
Back in the 60s, early 70s, I've got one field that must have 50 holes in it. And 5 years ago, they came back again, and apparently red is, according to the maps I was looking at, is like heavy deposit of, I think it's nickel and something else out there. And then next one it keeps going, it goes into orange and yellow and stuff. Now, that's been done 50 years ago. Do I just own down to 6 inches? If there's a deposit of nickel or gold or whatever it is?
You own the soil, I believe. I'm not sure if there's actually depth to it, but you own the soil on top of the rock.
The only time probably that you would actually see anything above the ground would be open pit mining. I'm assuming that most of your stuff is underground, or?
Yeah, well, and there is no mines, right? There is no mines around here. This is all exploration work to see if there is an economical concentration of a metal. And so like Charlotte County, there's the nickel for sure. There's lithium anomalies. Not sure if you guys are familiar with the Mount Pleasant mine north of St. George. That was tin, tungsten, zinc, indium, and I think they had molybdenum too. So one of those polymetallic mines. So they weren't mining one metal, they were mining a bunch of different metals. Yeah. So, you have the same geology kind of as that as well. We're focused on mainly gold is what our company is looking for mainly, but sometimes you don't know, you drill a gold anomaly, but all of a sudden you got a bunch of copper.
Thank you very much. So I will ask a question, especially where you just brought it up. There's still these wells. So you go out to these properties, you drill these wells, and the well heads or whatever I'll call them stay there.
Yeah, well, we don't drill wells. Most of these don't encounter water. It's a
Pipe stays there.
We try to get permission to leave them for the future. So it costs quite a bit of money to drill these holes. Just like a water well, right? It's expensive. Might want to go down deeper. So after you have holes in other places, you might realize, oh, that hole didn't go deep enough. We can reset up on that hole and just put the drill rods down and extend that hole a little bit further.
Okay, so my question would lead to not your side of things, but let's say I'm the property owner and I'd like to now develop and build something in that area, but these wellheads are there. Yep. Can I have them moved, or?
Yes, it's your private land. So that casing, it's called well casing, just like a normal water well, it only goes into the rock. Then it stops. So they drill the casing into the rock so the sediments don't fall into the hole. And then they have a smaller drill rod that goes inside the casing and drills that drill core. Yeah.
I guess, as long as it wasn't holding up something I might want to do with my property if it was my property.
We've definitely pulled lots of casing previously as well. So if the landowner requests us to pull the casing, we'll pull the casing. And in that case, if you did think, oh, geez, we should have went further in that hole, well, you're going to have to re-drill the whole hole at our expense. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Take care, man. Get a Conserve the Court update. Councillor Heislip. The floor is yours.
Just an aside there, when I was doing my engineering in Newfoundland, there's geological engineering. It's so obscure that there was one fellow that took the course. They call it the Fred course because there was only Fred. That's the only fellow that was doing the geological engineering. He was the only one in the university.
What's he doing now?
Probably doing quite well. Conserve the Court. I did have an update from Richard that I'm sorry that I didn't pass along because it was kind of like a few weeks ago, but I'll just try to do the highlights of it. Of course, everybody knows that the Archie took place. That's the golf tournament, fundraising golf tournament they have annually. It was a great success this year again. We made some money on it this year, so that was very good. The dinner held at the Five Kings was a success. I mean, it was unbelievable, the people there, and they all loved it. It was a great day. It was fantastic. Sponsorship and help by the MDSS was very well appreciated by the board and everybody involved. A draft MOU was sent to Jeff and the town. They're just wondering where maybe you can give an update on that, Jeff. And the repairs were finally done on the basketball court and on the building. So, yep. So that was that. And I do have a video that Louise Sumner put together for the 3-on-3 basketball, and it's only 1 minute and 37 seconds or something, or minute 35, and it's kind of interesting. It gives a little bit of hype about the people that were involved in the 3-on-3 youth tournament and all the. I just want to set it up that there was David Grange on there. There was Sherman. There was a bunch of celebrities. Diane Norman's the one that set it up. She was an Olympian. There was. Even some of the singers were involved in, like David Miles was involved, and Fresh West was involved in it too, and they just loved it, and so they set it up, and it's very well done. So I just wanted to play a little excerpt of that. So you can go ahead, Jim.
I didn't get a chance to test it before we.
I did. I looked at it, but not sure.
Well, Lord knows what we're going to be watching.
Oh, you could watch anything here.
I'd just be the audio, where the audio will come from.
Oh, no.
We brought together the community's rising stars for a day of hoops, fun, and inspiration. Celebrity guests shared their secrets to success, both on and off the court, and even challenged kids to a skill showdown. The tournament, coached by these legends, was the ultimate finale. Our community rallied together, from volunteers to sponsors, parents to teachers, to create an unforgettable day for our kids. This event is just the beginning of our mission to make basketball accessible to all, fostering fitness, teamwork, and a lifelong love of the game.
That was Michael Grange, not David Grange, because I'll probably get flack for that. You'll see him on TV on TSN anyway. So.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
Any questions or comments on that presentation? Thank you. Okay, next up, community safety update. You got anything to share, Kev?
There's some items since last month's committee of the whole meeting. Some vandalism in Chocolate Park. That was just after that meeting. Towards the end of August, we recovered some needles in Dover Hill, which we dealt with very quickly, and some pipe paraphernalia and the Milltown bandstand. And then just last weekend in the downtown plaza, we had more unsheltered items with graffiti and some clothing there's a little nook back there where there's some vegetation and somebody was sleeping in there. So, yeah, just things that we see on our daily checks throughout the town. So.
John? No. Okay. Yeah. All right. I don't know if I got anything. Just I know we're still dealing with some homeless issues in our community, and we're dealing with some evictions going on. Spent a good couple hours there today on an incident too, and shared some, I guess we'll call it facts with the concerned resident. Anyways, just know that this stuff is, I mean, we're still dealing with it. I wouldn't say it's better. I think we've all, some of us have adjusted to it, so it's not as shocking, but it's still an issue. So, and we got the weather changing on us right now, so it's very concerning by me, and I'm sure council shares that with me as well. So just know we'll be pressuring our province for some answers of what they're going to do this very coming soon. I mean, we're in the middle of September almost. Did you got something? Yes, go ahead, Sean.
Probably all noticed overnight it's getting colder, so there has been an uptick in calls to check on campfires related to the unsheltered, and I anticipate that's going to go up as it gets colder and colder. So it's already keeping us busy, and I'm sure that's just going to increase as the days go along. Yeah, I don't have much more to say about that. It's unfortunate. It ties up a lot of resources to go and find somebody, in an area with a relatively safe fire, just trying to warm their feet up, and we're forced to chase them away and put out their fire. And that's happened a couple times already this week. So try to be patient. Obviously, if you feel the fire is dangerous, then call. But if you feel safe to go and check before you call and determine whether it really warrants us to come out, it would be appreciated, I guess. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it is, like I said, it's a growing concern with weather changing, and until the powers that be can start dealing with this situation upstream, all we're doing is reacting, and it's really getting frustrating reacting with no tools. But yeah, what's that? Sorry.
Just a question for the chief.
Yeah.
Sean, just for my own information, we've had a pretty good summer. We've had a fair amount of rain. What's the forestry conditions now? It's coming into fall now. Is there any chance of these fires actually catching the forest on fire, or is it a different type of situation right now?
Well, it's actually quite dry, and there certainly is a risk if you're in a forested area that it could. Early in the morning, the risk is typically low. There's some moisture and whatnot that deteriorates as the day goes on. So what I would look at 7 o'clock in the morning and say is fine, I might not say the same thing at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We've got a stretch of dry weather coming. The forecast for the next couple of weeks is dry, so we do have to be careful. But at the same time, sometimes a lot of the times, the fires that we are encountering are, I would say, relatively safe. A lot of the times they build nice fire pits and things. Sometimes I encounter things that I would actually permit if they were landowners and could actually apply for a permit. I would permit it. Unfortunately, I can't if they're not the landowners. So it depends on the situation. But if the community is willing to, we're getting a lot of calls, and I get asked a lot, why are our call volumes up? There are a lot of people that see smoke. They're driving down the highway, they'll see smoke half a mile away, and they call without knowing what it even is that they're seeing. And so we're running around a lot of the time just to find out that it's a legally permitted fire that is totally fine, yet We've got volunteers that are leaving work, and our trucks are going down the road, and from my standpoint, it's frustrating. So I don't want to say, if you see smoke and fire, don't call. Just try to take the time to make sure about what you're calling. We get calls all the time, people coming from out of town, just driving by, I saw smoke. Don't even know where it is. So now I'm driving around trying to find it. I did that today. I was in the woods walking around trying to find a fire on vague directions that it could have been anywhere within a 2 or 3 square kilometer range. Like, it's not a good it's not a good use of my time, I guess. So just try to use some common sense when calling, I guess, would be my advice. Somebody's got to fly the drone, right? You know, right?
Okay. Just in the future, Council Corners, can you just put your hand up instead of interrupting me while I'm speaking, please? Well, no, just raise your hand. If I don't see your hand, then, you know, please speak up. But I usually scan the room, so please. Jeff?
Just an update from my office on some of these topics. I spoke with the Deputy Minister for Social Development yesterday afternoon to articulate some of the frustrations that the Chief shared with me. It was good enough to share with me about the extra calls and demands that are happening with the weather getting cooler at night. Basically, I was assured that we would have the municipality would have a formal update from Social Development probably tomorrow, but by the end of the week anyway, about what the plan is. I was led down to believe that there were certain documents that were just waiting to get some signatures on them before they could officially tell us what the plans are going to be. But from what I was told yesterday, 24 to 48 hours, we should have more guidance as to what the provincial plan is for our area for this winter.
Thanks, Jeff. Just keep in mind that hang on to your seats, folks, because there's going to be some tough decisions. It's going to be somewheres, right? So, sorry, Councilor Wright.
No worries, thank you. It may sound like a silly question, but have any communities ever had success or even tried to do like a barrel that is there for the purpose of somebody warming up if they wanted to throw some wood in it, where it's safe and it's in view and not in the woods where people who are cold could come warm up? Is there anything like that has ever been tried or could be?
That was something that I've suggested, I think, 3 or 4 years back. If we had a designated location where they could go, we could create safe fire pits that aren't going to burn into the ground and pop up 10 feet away in the woods or whatever. That would be part of identifying a location where, yes, that could be done. But we gotta have a place first before we can consider any of that.
I also would love to advocate with the provincial government not to have a huge transitional housing unit, but even in the States, they're costly, but they have what's called pallet shelters that are just kind of these small shelters that only one person can fit in. You can't bring a lot of things in there. Just because of the fact that even if there's another warming center, it's going to continue every year where we just put people in a warming center, we close it, and they're back out. And there are people that do find success when they're in the warming center. They make connections, they decide to maybe go to detox, they make changes, but they simply, even some get admitted to hospital for health issues, but for some reason, it's like the only individuals we discharge to the streets are people with active addiction sometimes. We would never discharge a senior, home if they weren't safe, but we often just discharge back to the streets. So for me, I am really passionate about the idea of having something, not a ton of units, but honest to God, even five structured units so that those individuals that can actually, if they come back from detox, they can go stay. Because the problem is a lot of the funding that's tied up with the government has all these outcomes measurements attached to it. And a lot of these people aren't willing to go. Maybe they just need a place for their dog to stay. Like, they're not willing to go to Ridgewood unless somebody can care for their dog, but they don't have anyone to do that. So where does the funding come from in order to send the dog there to go? So it's really tricky, but if there were even just 5 small structures, it would be a nice trial for us because we have nothing else here in this community. So when you talk about pilot project, I mean, the data is very clear. There's nothing else impacting the data in this area. We really are truly a pilot project because we don't have any other resources impacting the outcomes. So if you're talking with Minister Green, honestly, even like 3 to 5 small sheltered units, sober living, even a fenced-in little, but we can't keep having people find some little ounce of success and then being discharged right back out into it.
Well, I know Jeff and I have looked at these things, and I think you were going to talk to them. Did you show them those? I don't want to throw you like this is fresh stuff that we were just talking.
Yeah, I mean, last year when I went to my international City and County Managers Association meetings, the pallet houses and all that was a huge theme of tactics that were out there. I shared with the mayor the other day that I had outreach from a Canadian Indigenous-owned company that is looking at doing some stuff, and they wanted to have a chat about what might be doable. So I was booking a meeting with them just to explore things. Not necessarily saying that, it's a local government initiative, but at least to get the education component in to share with, my colleagues at Social Development, or at least discuss options and possibilities. The more knowledgeable that I become, the easier I can have those conversations. So there are those things happening in the background as we try and look at the relative success of 12 Neighbors and the new units that are going into St. John. There's this growing movement here, and I just wanted to. I'm trying to educate myself before I get into those conversations with my provincial colleagues as well.
I just wanted to share that. Well, that those discussions. Did I see Councilor Greenlaw?
So last year, we actually started a process to look for a potential encampment site of the 100 and however many properties we have, and it never really came to fruition. So I'm thinking, based on what Councilor Wright said and Councilor Rodas, I'm thinking we should probably in the next little bit, depending upon what Social Development says, we should maybe restart that process to look just to see if there might be something palatable. Right.
Yeah, but I think we like when we say we looked at what we had, and it wasn't acceptable or usable for that. So they had to go further and look at other lands that we don't own.
Well, I didn't think we looked at it all, though. I thought we started it, but we never actually finished. We never actually went through the.
They went through whatever it fit. Yeah. So I just want to make sure people understood that we actually have to own it. Right. Yeah. We can't just go out and say, "Oh, that looks like a good spot." Like, maybe the province can. I don't know, but yeah. Put it on the word. Anyways, Councilor Wright.
I would just comment that if we don't have the facility for a full-blown warming as a municipality, the means or the space to do a full-blown center, we may be able to visit looking at microsites for warming for those people who may never, if a shelter is over capacity, or for those people who just can't be quote-unquote confined is how some people would look at it. We may want to look at some smaller microsites that would provide that opportunity just for warming and keeping the fires in a safe place. So I don't think it's an all or nothing where we have to provide the whole thing. I think maybe the municipality could look at something just owned by the municipality to provide those little sites for warming.
Yeah, so you mean like in conjunction with whatever the province along with. Councilor Cornish.
I had a gentleman drop into my place a couple of weeks ago, and he basically just wanted to talk about the homeless, I guess. And he suggested something that I don't know if we looked at or not, but he said if they had a place where these people could go to, and then you had several spots, whether they were an apartment or, like you say, a shelter of some sort, where they could actually be assigned to one of those units. because right now they don't know where to go, I suppose, and how we get the information to it, but it sounded logical that if the word was out, that they would go to a central location and say, where can I sleep tonight? So if you go microcosms across the town versus one large thing, that something I don't think we've discussed before, but anything's open for discussion as far as I'm concerned, but that's all I have to say about that one.
Yeah, I guess I'm not an expert, but the problem with being all over the place is generally they have the small homes and then a washroom and kitchen facility like they can get to. So I don't know how that. But anyway, it's a valid point. Yeah, Councilor Heitzler.
The whole thing with that, we don't have any sites, so we can. Yeah, so they can come to wherever they want to, and we can't. So you can't send them anywhere because we don't have anything right now. So we need that basic. We need something, right? So.
Oh, that was you? Okay. I blame Brian. Okay, all right. So next up, we got the MDSS Planning Bylaw Update 2024 Background Report Presentation by Southwest Regional Service Commission. And is that going to be Alex or Xander? All right.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So Xander Gopin here, Senior Planner with the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission, is the lead author here on this report, and so he's going to take the presentation tonight. I will also be here, of course, for the discussion afterward, and hope we have a good discussion afterward. So, yeah, with that.
All right. Thanks, Xander. I'm going to stand up here because it's. I'm going to try and get through this presentation in 20 minutes. There's about 20 slides, and there's a fair amount of detail on them, but there's written report that comes with it. Yeah, so leave now. You can always leave during it. I won't be offended. I won't be offended. I think it's very interesting.
It will be very interesting.
Yes.
Unfortunately,
And it'll be on
I'm
video.
in Fredericton, so thank you very much for allowing us to come to make the presentation tonight. Thank you. And enjoy this presentation. I'm sure.
Thank you. Okay, so Alex and I are planners with the Service Commission, and we're hired by the municipality to work on your planning files. And since amalgamation, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but it's pretty important to have planning bylaws that are for the whole community. So I'll get into, there's a whole mishmash of things going on right now. Some places have no plans whatsoever. When I refer to plans and planning bylaws, what I'm talking about and what planners talk about are things authorized under the Community Planning Act, such as a municipal plan, a zoning bylaw, subdivision bylaw. There's some others, but these are the three that are the most relevant that we're talking about. Subdivision bylaw actually it's already been dealt with, but I'll get to that. So the municipal plan is kind of it sits at the top of this hierarchy, and it has binding policies and proposals that reflect the public interest in a community. And so policies in this can be a bit more vague. They might have a bit of interpretation that you need to do that folks like Alex and myself were trained to help interpret these. And we use current municipal plan policies in the cases of rezonings, and other kind of discretionary planning matters. Zoning bylaws are a little bit more of the day-to-day, what's used during development. They kind of divide an area into smaller areas where different land uses are allowed and different types of standards apply to how big a front yard is and things like that. So yeah, various land uses, for example, a single unit dwelling, an apartment, commercial uses, retail, industrial, those are all different types of land uses. So those, you don't necessarily want an industrial use right next to an apartment building or something like that. And planning bylaws, there's a huge amount of community consultation that goes into them. They're ultimately passed by council, and the Community Planning Act does require that they are prepared or with the help of professional planners and Alex and myself are professional planners. So that's why we're doing this work. They can be very powerful documents to prevent conflicts between land uses. One thing we see a lot in places without rural plans, typically the places without plans are rural, or where you have a very vague plan which says you can have every use kind of everywhere, you get land use conflicts, especially when you have growing communities. You know, when I say you don't want industrial things next to apartment buildings, well, if you don't have any planning, you can end up with that. And it's not, land use conflicts are not fun. We deal with them a lot in our office, but we believe that with good planning, we can prevent them. They can work to protect the safety and well-being of the public. You know, thinking about things like watersheds, where development happens in relation to those, forest fires, you know, something we talk about in the community. Again, there's a lot of preventative things that can be done with planning. Maybe not fixing some of the existing patterns of land use, but at least making sure we're not repeating problematic patterns moving forward. They can also work to safeguard the environment. You know, making sure again that things, certain more potentially polluting uses aren't near critical watersheds and things like that. I think the thing that most planners are really passionate about is supporting vibrant rural and urban economies. So we have both going on in St. Stephen. Sometimes urban really refers to serviced areas, so what you can have in a downtown core like St. Stephen with mixes of land uses right next to each other, having restaurants next to community centers, next to apartments. In rural areas, things are a little bit different where you can't have that much density because of services, but there are vibrant rural economies too. Agriculture, forestry, those are important. Mining came up earlier. Figuring out how everything fits together is a really important part that planning bylaws can play. So while they can preemptively avoid land use conflicts, they don't always settle civil disputes. So you can end up with, you know, property line disputes. There's nothing planning bylaws can really do about that. And also, just like most municipal bylaws, there's always amendment processes. So if there are needs for change in the future, those processes are built into the Community Planning Act. And, you know, part of the passing of a new planning bylaw, of a new municipal plan, zoning bylaw, there will be a lot of community consultation. Not all of that will be required, but a lot of that will be required. So that's one of the reasons why we do this work now, but to change it in the future. And, you know, every once in a while, Alex or myself will come before you for rezoning, something like that. That's that process. But with good planning bylaws that are forward-thinking, hopefully we avoid rezonings to the greatest extent possible. They don't work retroactively, so uses are grandfathered in if they were legal at one time. There are different mechanisms that kick in, so if there's, you know, really problematic uses, councils have opportunities to set standards. I don't really want to get into like all the details of that, but just sometimes people worry, oh, well, this say I can no longer do what I'm doing on my property. Probably not, as long as it was a legal use at one time. So I referred to a mishmash of different bylaws that are in effect in the current municipal district. So St. David, and I've tried to show it on a map here. There is the St. David Rural Plan. I don't know why these pointers don't work, but it's the green area on the right there. That's St. David and the St. David Rural Plan, former local service district. The St. Croix Corridor South Rural Plan runs all the way from McAdam to St. Andrews, so it's going to go through all of these, except doesn't apply in former municipal areas, so it's not in St. Stephen. Subdivision bylaw, which was just passed last year for the entire municipal district, so that's in effect everywhere. St. James, there is no rural plan for it, so it's not actually highlighted on the map, but it's kind of the upper left quadrant. The St. Croix corridor south plan is there within 30 meters of the ordinary high water mark. And that's the case for all St. Croix corridor south rural plans. Subdivision bylaw is in effect. St. Stephen, this is the former local service district of St. Stephen. This is kind of the bottom left quadrant. No rural plans, just the St. Croix South one. Subdivision bylaw as well. Dufferin, that's the orange on the kind of bottom right there. That has a rural plan that the Service Commission worked with the Dufferin Local Service District, including their former, I think he was the chair. Wade, were you the chair? Yes. No. Councilor Greenlaw was not the chair, but we did work with Councilor Greenlaw on that rural plan at that time. So it's fairly recent. St. Croix Corridor South rural plan as well. Subdivision plan. And finally, the town site, things that are a little bit more complicated. There's the municipal plan, M2, which was passed in 2020. Secondary municipal plan for the industrial park, which was passed in 2022. The zoning bylaw Z3, which was also passed in 2022. And the subdivision bylaw, which applies everywhere. So that's the mishmash. And part of the intent of the exercise we're going through is to take all those rural plans, the municipal plan, zoning bylaw, end up with one municipal plan for everywhere, one zoning bylaw for everywhere. That doesn't mean the same zones. There's going to be different urban zones, different rural zones, and different municipal plan policies for both areas. Subdivision bylaw, done, taken care of. Secondary municipal plan for the industrial park. Can't think of any reason to make changes there. It's fairly recent. St. Croix Corridor South Rural Plan, also fairly recent, has been working pretty well, so probably not any changes there. Okay, so now we're getting into the data, and part of the reason why we do these background studies, it's not just because the province says we have to. It's kind of the showing your work part of getting an answer. So if you imagine that your municipal plan is your answer to the question, I know we have some teachers, former teachers in the room. It's really important to show your work. So we're not pulling things out of thin air. There's reasons behind things. And so some of the tools we use are demographic data. That's largely coming from the census. That was last done in 2021. So a lot of the data is coming from there. We compare it to 2016 to see changes over time. We can also break down geographical areas with the census. It's a little bit complicated with the new municipal boundaries, and there's a little bit of fudging we have to do around the edges. Not every division lines up perfectly with the new municipal boundaries, but we do our best to get this kind of demographic picture of the population. This is sort of what we're looking at here, those numbers, how it's changed over time. So there's been some growth in the former municipal boundary, which I'll call the town site. There's been a little bit of decline in the former local service district. So this is a pretty common pattern that we see regionally and across the province, that it is the serviced areas that tend to be growing a little bit more, and there's a lot more capacity for growth in a certain sense there. So I think that's part of that reason. We don't get super great data for municipalities as small as we are, but looking at the whole of the province, we can see that population increase has continued since 2021. In fact, it may even be going up at a faster rate. We did get some numbers from the province in 2023 that the population of the entire municipal district is just under 8,500, and that's up from a little bit less than 8,000 in 2021. So the numbers don't quite line up with the census and the numbers we get from the province. But again, we do the best with the data we have. Okay, so you won't be able to see the numbers on these maps, but the darker colors are where things are bigger or happening faster. So this is the overall population count, and it's broken down by census subdivision. So you can see where the population is kind of concentrated, and it's in the town site, a little bit in Dufferin and St. David, Oak Bay to some extent, and then it gets sparser, and we'll see some density maps as well. This one I think is really interesting, and it just refers back to the previous slide where I was talking about the geographic locations of the population change. You can see it's really happening the most in the town site, with a little bit less, I'd say, decline in Dufferin and Oak Bay. Population density, this is probably fairly obvious if you've driven around. There's a lot more people in the serviced area in the former town site. And this one is an interesting one. It's the closest analog we can get to vacation homes. So it's a particular census measure, and where it's darker red, that means you have a greater percentage of homes that are most likely to be lived in by the usual residents. They're not vacation homes. And we've seen an increase in regularly occupied dwellings across the region, probably an impact of COVID. But some Americans say we're having too much trouble getting here. We're going to sell. And you can see kind of, if you think about our area, Oak Bay is a place where you'd imagine there's the most vacation homes. And that's, again, the data sort of backs that up. So that's a little bit of geographically how people are located in the district. Looking at age, aging is a big story, not just for St. Stephen, not just for New Brunswick, but for all of Canada, for most developed countries dealing with aging. So we've got New Brunswick on the bottom there to kind of compare everything to. And yeah, the town site is a little bit older, aging at a little bit of a faster rate, and we are seeing aging across the municipal district as well. These population pyramids on the left comparing the entire district over time, and on the the entire kind of serviced area over time, and on the right it's the entire local, the former local service district areas. And these are generally what are called stagnating population pyramids. So this breaks down where aging is happening. And we are seeing larger proportions in the upper age brackets and lower proportions over time in the bottom age brackets, with a few exceptions here and there. Obviously doing things to attract young families is a really good way to have a growing population, where we have a growing tax base and have services and all those things. But also aging populations require specialized facilities. There are some in the community already. But there are certain things when it comes to accessibility, thinking about conditions of sidewalks, not just for aging, but also for young families who have strollers. I have an aging parent, and they don't live in St. Stephen, but I push them around in their wheelchair, and you notice sidewalk conditions very quickly when you're doing that. Income is another thing we look at, and St. Stephen is on the lower end in New Brunswick, but it's growing at sort of that same rate as the province. We do see higher. Is that household or? Yes, household income. Good question. So that's if it's a household with 2 income earners, that's 2 income earners. If it's 1 income earner, it's 1 income earner. But this is the general metric that's used across the board to look at income is median gross household income. And it's, there's inflation, things have probably gone up a little bit since 2021, but you can sort of see where the income distribution across the population is, with Dufferin having the highest and the former town site having the lowest. When you look at the census, there's a decrease in low-income measures. Anybody who sort of lives and exists in society, I think we have enough anecdotal data now to be able to say that's really clearly not obvious, and we have enough reports coming from United Way and things like that to say we're obviously dealing with income, significant income inequality, growing income inequality, more and more people struggling to make ends meet, which leads to things like unsheltered folks, leads to food insecurity, a lot of the problems that end up being talked about in this chamber are income problems. So there's not a ton that a municipal plan can do to fix that, but it's very important to understand the types of folks who live in the community and make up the public here.
One more time.
Yes.
So when I look at the age demographics,
yeah,
I mean, that's definitely going to affect the income for St. Stephen.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the population and who are above 60.
Yeah, and if you're just on CPP, yep, definitely. Nope. Feel free to pop in. I'm going to just kind of plow through as quickly as I can because it's a lot. So looking at employment, this is pretty important because you can see over time where those economic trends are going in terms of who is living in the community and where they're working. So this is the entire municipal district, and you can see different industries on the left, and the orange bar is what it was in 2016. The blue bar is what it was in 2021. So healthcare and social assistance, and this clearly is tying into the aging, that's gone up. We have a lot more folks living here who are working in healthcare and social assistance. Also accommodations and food services, and there's more restaurants and food service businesses that are open. Construction has actually gone up a little bit, which is great. That's not something that's happening everywhere, and we need people to build things, especially houses. But manufacturing has gone down, and that's an important part of St. Stephen's economy with the industrial park. Transportation and warehousing, again, kind of in that same vein. This is, on the right, we're looking a little bit more of a geographic distribution of where people who work in these industries are living. I won't really go into too many details there, and it sort of follows what you would expect with people living in town who are working at the things in town, and people living out of town more likely to be in the rural economies. Participation rate, so that's the number of people in the job market, either working or looking for work, that's declining. But employment rates have increased, and I think there's just some provincial data yesterday that where New Brunswick has one of the lower unemployment rates in the country right now. Most significant increase is healthcare. So again, that's coming from the aging population, and frankly, given what we see, even though that's increased so much, it still probably isn't as many healthcare workers as we need at the hospital or the nursing homes or personal support workers. Okay, immigration and migration. I'm gonna try and jump through this. So we have seen a lot of increases in immigration. It's the only way that population is growing at this point. It's either folks coming from other provinces or other countries. Natural births are not outpacing deaths. Can see some data on what generation immigrants living in the community are. And you can see that you do have a bit more first generation immigrants in the town site itself. And again, more immigrants generally in the town site. That's going to have more likely to have services. If folks don't have cars, it's going to be easier to be here. If you need apartments to rent, I'll get to that another slide. It's much more likely to be in the town site. When I've talked with the Multicultural Association, they say, there are more immigrants who are coming and more are staying, but retention is still a major challenge. You have folks who will come, maybe stay for a year or two, but then they move to a bigger center, St. John or Toronto or Montreal. As I said before, immigration is really the immigration and interprovincial migration is the only way population is growing in New Brunswick. So I think I went through all that. Okay, so housing. This is just looking at a little bit of the breakdowns of the different costs of rentals, different costs of home ownership, different amounts that people are spending on those, and cost of dwellings, so a bit of a comparison. And obviously rentals are kind of concentrated in the town site, so some other areas really don't have any data for that. This is a bit of information on general affordability. So when the question comes up, what is affordable housing? When we look at St. Stephen, if we're using 2021 numbers, thinking in that moderate income rate, so around $1,100, anything under that. And I know that for folks who've lived here for a long time, that seems like a huge number. And when I first moved here, I think I rented an apartment for like $400 a month. Probably doesn't exist anymore. But for new apartments, when we, if we want to help people develop affordable things, those are the numbers we want to keep in mind. So if council's going to help out, maybe we'll get a bunch of money through HAF. Going to submit that application tomorrow. And then you get to have these discussions with developers and say, well, if you can have your rents at this level, then we can give you help to get there. Across the board, renters are struggling far more than owners when it comes to cost. It's, I know things are challenging for everybody right now, but it's very stark. There has been progress when we look at number of dwelling units permitted. They are going up every year, and you can see some of that in the apartment growth we've seen, infill developments around town. So there's been progress on housing goals. Vacancy rates have gone up a little bit, at least in the time that we've been looking at it. When we think about planning, and again, this really ties into some of the discussions that you're having in this chambers. In the current plans, there's really no consideration of a full spectrum of housing options. There's, things like duplexes, apartments, and single unit dwellings. But what we see now is the need for supportive housing, transitional housing, maybe pallet shelter housing. And I think we need to acknowledge that these are going to be realities that we're going to deal with. And so planning for them rather than sort of ad hoc trying to find, here's the place, and then we end up in very difficult community conversations. Incorporating these things into plans and zoning is really important. And the city of St. John, when you look at some of their plans, you can see that they've considered some of these things, and that some of the things that are going in certain places, they've been zoned for that. And so it's not a huge surprise for residents when it happens, and it's an easier process. So definitely something to consider for zoning and the municipal plan going forward.
Back at 1960, what happened there that was such good growth?
Here?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's not, you're looking at everything before 1960. And so if you think of the housing stock in St. Stephen, you've got houses probably going back to 1890 something. So there's a lot more houses that were built before 1960. And then after 1960, you get to start seeing, well, here's the amount of starts in that period. And you can see that it's really been declining over time in all areas. And 2016 to 2021, it's been picking up a little bit. And I think, we have good access to permitting numbers, and I would say that growth has continued, at least for the town site. And this is a bit of a breakdown of the different types of housing that exist across the municipality. Not surprisingly, the kind of semi-detached row house apartments, those are all going to be in the town site. And, I think you can see a little bit of a decrease in the apartments. That was probably a 2020 thing. And I think if you did that now, there's been an increase, although we have lost a few. Single detached houses still dominate, but they are making up they still make up a significant proportion of the housing stock.
The apartments rated by units, or just one building could have 20 units and one could have 40?
So that's the number of dwelling units in each of those categories. So an apartment in a building that has fewer than 5 stories. So the Beacon, for example, that's got 50 dwelling units. So all 50 of those would go into that bucket.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so moving out of the demographic data, we're looking at really geographic data at this point. And that leads to a lot of maps. And there's a lot that we can learn through maps. And when you're going to end up making maps that are zoning bylaws and municipal plan areas, these maps are sort of the building blocks of those and tell us, well, if we've got these types of areas, this is how we want to set policies and standards for them. So watersheds, very important, especially when your drinking water is coming from them, as it is with the Moores Mills watershed. So treating that with a lot of care. And then there's a whole bunch of other environmental sites that and conservation priority things like wetlands. There are some provincial sites that are identified as wildlife areas. there's kind of this whole mishmash of overlaying regulations, and one of the things that we can do with plans is kind of try and align all of those and make sure that they're it's not that, well, if you go to the province, they say you can do this thing, but under the local bylaws, you can only do this, but the province said I could do this thing, but you can only do this thing here. So we get into that a lot, and aligning everything is a good way to avoid that. Sea level rise, we've seen some pretty intense storms over the last year, and can kind of ground truth some of these maps. There's some pictures of the ground truthing down at Pizza Delight and on the waterfront trail. So these have impacts to infrastructure. We do have some updated sea level rise projections. So there is a kind of sea level rise zone in the current zoning bylaw, but there are some other areas like in Oak Bay that should be looked at, and there are new projections. We know a little bit more now. For some of the infrastructure risk that's been identified, it's going to be big, expensive stuff, and you're going to need multi-level governmental partnerships to adapt to it. So thinking about that. One of the best ways to mitigate climate change, as well as having all of these other benefits with thriving communities and a lot of the other things I've talked about, is mixed uses with density of dwellings and amenities. So lowering the energy that's needed to get places, whether that's in a car, whether that's by foot, by bike. The less energy it takes to get there, the easier it will be, the more likely people are to get out of their homes and go do things. There's all sorts of public health benefits to this as well. And it's and really when the province says you need to think about climate change in your plans, this is one of the best ways to do it, is efficient land uses. And you just mentioned the provincial regulations and legal statutes. So natural resources, we heard about some of the mineral resources in the region. This is an agriculture map. So it's showing some of the prime soil locations. For folks from other rural areas coming to rural New Brunswick, especially southwestern New Brunswick, it's surprising to see the lack of farms. There are some, there's some, Madson's farm is, I guess they're actually just outside of this. But there's some local food options, but it's pretty minimal. This is the mineral claims map. We saw a much better version of it in the earlier presentation. We do have a few claims that it looks like are wanting to be explored up in the northern part of the municipal district. Municipal plans and zoning bylaws can set some standards for those types of operations. Aquaculture, this is the Oak Bay Hatchery. Fisheries and aquaculture, big part of Charlotte County, maybe slightly less than the municipal district, but that doesn't mean, especially with Oak Bay and some of those areas, that there aren't going to be land-based components. So as we looked at in the previous slide, employment has declined in these areas. Some of the sort of hot spots in terms of land use conflicts that we've seen are coming around homesteading and livestock, especially in unplanned areas. So at least the rural plans that exist generally have separation distances. And there's a pretty good way to deal with these things, but in some cases they're not being dealt with at all right now. So if there are going to be new fisheries or aquaculture operations, having really good standards to prevent pollution. And then, given the importance of food and local food and food security, is there any opportunity to really support some of the folks who have farms in the area? One of the other things identified on the map to the left are existing fields, existing properties that have been identified as agricultural. So are there succession plans for those? Are there ways to kind of better use the existing resources we have? And at the very least, maybe there should be ways to preserve larger parcels that are in those areas so they don't get subdivided to the point where they can no longer be used for agriculture or forestry or things that need maybe more space and more separation from neighbors. So that was one aspect of the economy. Another very important aspect in St. Stephen is the industrial park. I mentioned the secondary plan earlier. This is an excerpt out of that with a bit of a build-out plan for some new infrastructure, for some new services to attract new industrial businesses and really utilize that site and make the most of the tax base. That same principle, while not with industrial development, that can be applied to the downtown as well, and even parts of King Street. There's a lot of empty space, which means a lot of opportunity for infill development that uses existing services, adds to the tax base without drawing from it. So I mentioned the industrial park secondary plan. Accommodations. I think we all know that we would really like a hotel here and would open up a lot of opportunities. And so continuing to work on that, making that happen. Infrastructure and asset management. One of the things that I've learned working with the municipalities that I do is one of the best, the first tool of economic development is having really good, reliable infrastructure so that when businesses come, they know that, water is going to work. People are going to be able to get where they're going. Water fees, again, this is something we've heard from especially multi-unit apartment developers, is that the way that water fees work currently is really very expensive compared to other municipalities, and figuring out maybe a more equitable way to manage water fees. Maybe that's moving towards different types of metering. That could be a way to spur some development as well. General land use. So this is, again, it's provincial data, and the yellow areas are what are called settlement areas. So that's where you have people living, people working. The brown areas are forest. So that's a large proportion of the land base is forest. You've got some of your agricultural resources, the green areas, and wetlands and water bodies and things like that, as well as some of the industrial stuff in the pink. The density of population really follows these patterns. We use buildings as a bit of an analog, but the top right, those are the roads where you see the concentration. The bottom in the municipality, it's fairly concentrated everywhere. So there are new provincial regulations that direct growth to serviced areas or existing roads. Service doesn't necessarily mean with sewer and water. So in rural areas, existing public roads are considered areas that can handle growth. I sort of mentioned this with existing rural plans, or if you have no rural plans, there's this one-size-fits-all approach that leads to land use conflicts and unplanned development. So it's really good to identify the locations for some of these more intensive activities like big livestock operations, forestry, and some of the aquaculture things. So identifying good places for those to go. An industrial park for some things, but in some cases it's isolating some of those large forested areas, making sure that they don't become predominantly residential, so that they can be retained as a resource base or as a conservation base. So I mentioned the industrial park. Transportation, we talked about roads a little bit. This is an example of a complete street. So you've got bike lanes, you've got space for cars, you've got space for parking, you've got pedestrian spaces, street trees. So it's kind of thinking about all these different users. And this is just a little bit of a diagram over, sometimes you'll hear about an arterial street or a collector street or a local street. And the DTI does use this classification. So arterials are really good for getting where you need to go quickly. A highway's even better for that. But for local streets in municipalities, having access to different businesses, having access for multiple users becomes much more important. And this is an excerpt from the current subdivision bylaw. So for new streets, a lot of these principles are in place. They could be put into place for resurfacing projects. So, if King Street's going to get a major upgrade, I think there's a lot of opportunities there for it to become more of a multi-user street. You do have a high school at the end of it. I do see lots of folks who work up at the McDonald's, Tim Hortons. They're walking to work and stuff. So a lot of opportunities to really improve. And I do see many more people biking in town. It's not just me and Robin Healis anymore. There's more of us out there. And I think the better the infrastructure is, the more likely people will be to use that mode of transportation. More kids will be out biking, biking to school, walking to school. And one other thing to consider with transportation is on the right, Highway 1 is the kind of lighter red one, but there's all those dark red roads. Those are called public non-maintained access, public access non-maintained roads. So they're public, they're owned by the province, but the province doesn't maintain them. And they basically are very hard to develop off of. They create lots of challenges. Some of them are really just old forest roads. Some of them are do have development on them, like the end of Hills Point Road. They can be a bit more challenging. But one thing really important to keep in mind is you just got your road condition report. There's a fair amount of investment that needs to go into the existing roads. So we need to think really, really carefully about new roads. Right now, the province is dealing with all the roads in the former local service districts. Most people in our worlds are expecting that's not going to be the case forever. So really, really think carefully about new roads. When a developer comes and says, I want to do a subdivision, and it's going to get you all these property taxes, it's going to be great. We really need to think hard about those decisions and make sure it is going to be a good return on investment. Just a bit of map of the infrastructure and municipal services. Emergency services are an important part of municipal services, and dealt with some emergencies last year. I just mentioned the long-term sustainability of existing infrastructure, how new assets can impact the levels of service. I sort of hinted at this before with forest fires, but another really good reason to not have new roads going into rural areas, especially cul-de-sacs, is they make emergency evacuation really hard. This was a problem around Halifax, I guess last summer. They had forest fires in the suburban ring around Halifax, and there were some subdivisions that were basically impossible to evacuate because they were the super long cul-de-sacs with one way in and one way out. So the new subdivision bylaw is great. It's not going to let any of those things happen, but there's probably some areas that are going to be challenges for emergency management. Also, there's some nursing homes that are really far out, and knowing where those are and being ready to assist those folks in those cases. Having public space with generator capacity is really nice for emergency management. I think may have been a bit of a missed opportunity with this facility, but if there's ever an opportunity to add something like that, when you have an emergency, having a place where everybody can come and know they're going to be warm and can charge their phones and everything like that is really important for a community. Getting to the end here, heritage and history. So as the mayor starts every meeting, we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Besco-Winnicott people, working with those folks, the PRG in town here. They're doing a lot of great environmental work. But there's a lot of work that goes into reconciliation and making sure that the municipality is considering those things going forward. The way this tends to touch land use planning the most is with archaeology. I know there's some sites in the municipality, and it's nobody really knows where they are, but for larger developments, considering archaeological impact assessments to make sure archaeological sites are preserved. There's lots of local heritage and history. Some of that's highlighted through Chocolate Fest and International Fest. But there's a lot of great built heritage in St. Stephen, which gets overlooked maybe in favor of some other municipalities. Definitely not saying a heritage bylaw or anything like that, but just maybe some promotion, some support for resources, things like that. And I mentioned the Best Go to Makati people. Recreation and culture, lots of great recreation activities in and around town. Making sure that those stay accessible to the public. There's the walking trail is a really great resource. And I know that paving is often controversial, but you have seen a lot more people using it since it got paved. It does open it up for a lot more users. And I know, again, it's just something to consider with other trails moving forward. The St. Croix River presents a lot of recreational opportunities, especially with the dam removal. There's, I know there's been some discussions around new water sport activity that could happen there, fishing. So a lot of potential. The Oak Bay Campground and Beach. The campground's very popular. The beach is maybe not what it used to be. You can look at some old pictures and it's full of people, lots of activities happening there. And families do still use it, but it's, there's some, maybe even few safety concerns with it in how it's set up. And it's leased by the province, so there may be some opportunity to work with the province and see if it can be more of a community asset. Public boat launches, that's a great community asset as well. With the St. Croix River being open, I know the municipality's considered one of those public non-maintained roads is maybe for a boat launch, and increasing public access to the river is a great thing to do. ATVs comes up in council a lot. Other municipalities have implemented bylaws that allow the ATVs to use the public streets legally. It's something to consider. And I do live on Hawthorne Street, and I see them go up and down the street all the time. And honestly, at this point, I tune them out. But if you ever need to set up a camera and make sure everyone's got their plates and is registered, I'm happy to volunteer my house for that. So, yeah. Yeah, but it is what it is. So timeline for moving through this process. We've done the pre-consultation background study, but this is the first time council's kind of seeing it. So we're definitely aware there might be some changes, some things we missed that will come from you folks. After we kind of got that in a state where we want to take it to the public, we start doing public consultation. We haven't drafted anything yet in terms of bylaws and policies, but there are some directions that I sort of tried to highlight in this presentation that this background study points in. So once we have a bit of a sense of what those policies are going to be, we do want to present everything to the public way before it's required. We can do things virtually. We can do things in person. I think it's important with amalgamated communities to be in person across the municipality. So, doing things in Oak Bay, doing things in Moores Mills, wherever there's a community space to do it. The nature park, maybe we can do one. We should do it in person there. And there will be some key stakeholder interviews as well. We've already had good conversations with the municipal staff and engineer consultants on some of the asset stuff. And then hopefully, I guess we're in the fall already, but hopefully in the winter we can start getting into drafting. There is a new requirement that everything goes to provincial departments, so that as well. And then we do a little bit more public consultation when the drafts are really starting to gel and there's actual policies and actual zones and standards. So when you look at your property, you can say, this is what I can expect around me and for me. And then that can, if there are issues, that can be changed. And then hopefully, winter might be a little ambitious, but in early 2025, starting to move it through the council adoption process, 3 readings, public hearings, views of Prac, all that good stuff. So that is it. A lot of information. I'm happy to answer any questions. Alex is here too. He did a lot of work on the background study, especially on the downtown BIA stuff, and he's kind of our transportation guru. So I'm sure he's happy to answer questions as well. And if you want to take time to digest, reach back out to us later. Feel free to do that too. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councilor Otis.
I noticed in your report the section on the municipal airport. That did really interest me. Just the concept of keeping it as an asset, selling it, or even gifting it, which is something that I never considered. I'm just wondering, have you had experience with any other, community who has done something like that?
We haven't. I think the CAO might have.
So there's a case where a municipality had an airport. Yeah, I'm on. Okay. There's a case where a municipality had an airport in northern New Brunswick, and in that case, I believe it was gifted to the Regional Service Commission to take care of. I'm not saying that, we're not recommending that as the solution here, but it's on the list of possibilities. The idea with that recommendation is that given the large number of assets that you have to just keep up in good condition, the road condition report was a big one. The water supply system is another big one. These are core services, basic services you must do before everything else. So the airport is an excellent asset to the whole region, but as a local government, it's not a local government mandated service. So the question you have to ask yourself when you're looking at your list of priorities in terms of your overall future, is this one of those things that's part of your core service, or is it something another entity would do a better job of investing in it for its future success? Because of course the airport is a major asset, but is it a core service that you must be responsible for, or could another entity have a better chance of success, and could you have a better job as being a promoter and advocate of it, or some other sort of arrangement? So it's a question. We don't have all the right answers, and I think it's one that you could put in your plan as something you're going to explore.
I get myself in trouble when I speak about this, but that seed's been planted. I mean, I've asked the region, but when you look at the region, though, it's not the whole region that does utilize the airport, because you got to think about the islands that are part of our region as well. I don't want to say they don't care, but they wouldn't care anymore about the airport here. They got their own. They got to worry about for Grand Man, for example, and they Campobello. But you got right in this core of the region, yes, and it should be definitely considered. Because right now we as a municipality are maintaining and looking at it, and it has some issues coming up. Same things going on at the roads or going on that airline or runway. So it's been planted, but it's like giving away a cell phone. It comes with a bill, right? But anyway, okay, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
I was thinking just the reason I asked that was even the thought of gifting it to a flight school who would actually, bring something here to Charlotte County, because I know when we toured the airport, I think they said within the next 10 years, we're going to be in need of 50,000 pilots. They talked about the fact that this is a great area to learn how to fly seaplanes. We have the ability for people to come in and I think clear themselves through a certain customs. So there are a lot of unique advantages, I think, it could be sort of a public-private partnership. I personally would love for somebody to take it on, because I agree with you in the sense that it's not a core thing that we really need to look at on the day-to-day, but I do think there's tons of potential out there. It's the money involved with it. But flight school, that's why I was curious about other areas in the Maritimes, if they've actually, been gifting it to educational institutions to try to encourage.
I'm going to jump on that and plant another seed. When you say there's lots of potential, there is, but we're not going to get the potential manage it the way we manage it with lack of resources to do it. Like, so we're missing out on those potential. There is some, like I know the St. Andrews did share a study with us, and it's very, there's a lot of things that will happen if that extension happened and all those sorts of things. So yes, definitely potential, but again, it's going to take more than little old District of St. Stephen to do it. It's going to take, but everyone's got to recognize that potential will benefit us all. Right? But anyway, sorry, go ahead, Councilor Greenlaw.
Yeah, just quick one, Xander. On page 52, when in your key insights on the transportation, the statement policies and rural zoning should align with the rural road classification system for DTI. Are you talking just specifically designated, non-designated roads? Or are you talking about the road classification from the standpoint of how their roads are serviced?
So the arterial, collector, local, that kind of distinction. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your guys' effort.
Yeah,
and
if you have more questions, if you read it, if you want to look at maps closer, we can provide you with all that information.
Okay. So yeah, so I got to adjourn this one and jump into the next one here. All right. So I'm mover and seconder to adjourn this meeting at 8:03 p.m.
So moved. Second.
Councilor Greenlaw, Councilor Eastman, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you. All right, welcome to our Wednesday, September 11th, 2024, and it's at 6 p.m., but it's not, it's 8, I'll call it, 8:10 probably. I've already done the recognition. I need a mover and seconder for the agenda. Special council meeting September 11th, 2024 be approved. Councilor Eastman, Councilor Greenlaw, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Any conflicts of interest? Seeing none. All right, first up, we got the request for decisions. Oh, this is a council meeting. So a mover and seconder for the Economic Development Partnership Agreement. Councilor Heislip.
Second.
Councilor Wright, that council approve within the memorandum of the understanding partnership agreement as presented, subject to approval by the two other parties named therein. All right, I'll start off. Is there any questions?
Can I just ask that the vote be recorded on this one?
Sure. All right, so obviously there's questions. Fire away if there's any questions.
I want to confirm that future St. Stephen is in the loop.
In the loop how?
Of any kind, because it's my understanding that, are we in close?
No.
No, we're not.
Oh, we're in open. So it's my understanding that they have heard talks of something new coming in terms of economic development, obviously. But I want to ensure that we have had a very clear conversation with them prior to actually making a decision on this or moving forward in any capacity. I've had too many people ask me questions and have concerns and have not been in the loop.
All right, well, what we're trying to do tonight is find out if we need to have that conversation with them, right? So this has been going on now for how many we've been talking about it here in this council room for a couple months now. And we got a strategic plan we got to get moving on. There's a lot of things we're holding up. Either way, it's a decision of council. But once we make the decision, you can have that conversation with however the outcome of this evening comes, right? Because we got two other municipalities waiting on us.
There's a couple of things I question.
Yep.
You take a look at page 6 of the 24 pages. The board nomination authorization committee will consist of the following: the mayors and the municipal partners. I believe that we should actually beef that up a little bit and have one times counselor from every partner involved. If you're not involved, you're sick, or you're out of business, we still have, during the meeting, we would have no representation. At least if we had somebody for backing you up, like an alternate.
That's right. Deputy Mayor would be alternate.
Another one I've seen too on page 7, it says Thrive shall consult at least once per year. And then they come down, if you come down on to the subject, such amounts will be paid in equal installments on Jan 1st, April, July, so quarterly. Why could not Thrive shall consult at least quarterly instead of once?
This is minimal. You didn't know, you just read it. At least once, right? At least.
At least once.
Yes.
But should we not specify that we would like a report every quarter? I'm not nitpicking this, so it's just when I read this, it's pretty loosey.
So I just want to actually say, I mean, we are actually voting on this tonight. These questions, if they're on your mind, I mean, they should have came forward before tonight. I mean, vote any way you want to vote. But I'm just saying, if you have these questions and concerns, we're not building this tonight, we're voting on it. We've already built it and approved it to come to council. And now here we are, we're questioning it some more, which is nothing wrong with that. But again, I hear questions of getting on the strategic plan, and we're going to delay it even some more if we keep waiting. And we got 2 municipalities waiting for us on this, so. Sure.
My issue is that when we've discussed it in the past, I've asked directly, will you as mayor be handling that conversation so that we can handle a healthy transition from people who have dedicated, decades to this community in terms of economic development? It's not that I'm not for a regional move here. I think it is strategic in the sense that it opens up funding streams. I think that we can work better, even tonight when we're talking about regional, an airport, things like that. If we had regional support, we could certainly grow. However, I just don't feel comfortable about the transition and how it's been handled, and I don't feel comfortable voting on it and giving it a yes, knowing that we have left Future St. Stephen in the dark completely on this. I just don't feel comfortable with that. I don't think that's good practice.
And the fact is, you can't have the conversation with them if we're not doing it, right?
Give them a heads up.
They know. They know what's going on.
Can you confirm that you have given them? So why would it be that I've had members reach out and say that they have not been given a heads up? The only heads up they've had is they have heard talks through the grapevine or had other people in other municipalities call, but they have not sat down. And it's not that we have to give all the details of everything. It's just to be courteous and let people know that we are looking into regional opportunities, because we need the buy-in from our community if we want this to be successful.
So, are we prepared? Well, it's on the table to vote. And if there's more questions, ask away. But if not, we're going to put it on the table to vote.
I guess that's one of the questions I did submit, and I spoke last time about the changes I felt needed to be put into it, and I put them in some more in writing to you, actually, right? And it's the same thing. I'm not against the model, and I'm not against moving forward in it, but I'm not against signing. I'm against signing a $70,000 check when I don't know what I'm going to get for it and what it looks like. I know Future St. Stephen has assets. How are they going to work? If we're going to hire somebody, if it's going to be like a Canada-wide search, are we going to do, relocation costs? For instance, and a board, if you're going to bring somebody new in, if they're from a different area, I think we need to have the board in place first before that person's hired, so that there's a support system to help introduce them to all the different parties and agencies. The strategic plan, I think, does need to be less than, I'd like 90 days, I said, rather than 12. the more frequent reports. And then who's this person actually employee of? Is Thrive its own company? Are they going to be registered? Are they employee of the MDSS? And who pays the benefits and so on and so forth? So, like I say, that's just all stuff I like to have clear in my head before I say, yep. Call me crazy.
No, there's nothing crazy with the questions, but we should have dealt with these questions earlier when we're voting on it tonight. Can any of those questions you answer, Jeff, easily?
I mean, there's still things to be figured out. Obviously, previously council has seen a draft of what was labeled bylaw number 1, which would be the actual incorporation bylaw for a new corporation. It was subject to lots of changes and obviously the agreement of the 3 parties, right? So there's a lot of things about, whether the board composition is the CAOs, whether the board composition is at large or councillors. I mean, these are things that what I would suggest would be ironed out at a meeting of the 3 councils if the agreement in principle to proceed is there. You bring everybody together. There are other jurisdictions who had questions on different elements as well. One tabled it waiting for us. The other one approved it just recently, with the knowledge that there's more work to be done before everything before everybody's happy with everything. But so as far as the concept, and again, it's just a concept at this point. It was going to be a standalone company, not dissimilar to how Future St. Stephen set up, and the employee would be, a contracted position. Again, not dissimilar to how Future St. Stephen was set up. Just responsible for the priorities established by the 3 partners. So, that's kind of where the CAOs are at, is the ability to know that we can gather, that there's enough interest or enough agreement in principle to the concept that if we have to get everybody together to hash through the last pieces and make sure that bylaw number 1, which is going to be the real governing document of it anyway, meets the goals and the hopes and dreams of all the partners. That's fine. That's doable. I'm happy to host it in this facility and help facilitate it if that was the desire. But that's where we're at. We're just trying to figure out that there's an agreement in principle on the concept, and if there's things to be ironed out, get everybody together and let's iron them out.
The meeting of the 3 councils to make some of the major decisions. I think that's a good way to go. Lastly, and partly to Councillor Rodis's comment, is that if there's going to be a transition from Future St. Stephen to this, there needs to be a plan, there needs to be communication, there needs to because there's irons in the fire right now. I know there are investors and there are developers that Future St. Stephen have been helping. I know some of that stuff's been kind of put on the burner. And there's some doubt out there, I guess. So I think there needs to be clear direction and communication with Future St. Stephen to say, if we move to this new model, it's going to be in this timeline, and this is what our expectations of you would be. And we'll fund you and your services, but we want to make sure we get good services up until this point. And this is what will happen once we hire somebody and transition over, right? And that's the kind of stuff I'd like to see guaranteed before I vote yes. That's,
But again, I say we got to know we're going to do it before we do it, right? No point. No, that's a hard conversation to have with a group of people. So we want to make. We're having it with them right now, obviously.
Because tonight, though, is just committing to have the conversation and to do a change management plan. That's what you would be committing to tonight. That's all I have.
Question? So we're voting on the concept of going this way, and after we pass that barrier or hurdle, then what Wade is talking about is actually essential to have all those rules, regulations, and whatever process and procedures we have that runs this operation. Right now, I'm on Wade's page, the same thing is like we're getting into a new corporation, and we really don't have a lot of that next, as long as we agree that we're going to proceed with it, but we also have to agree that what Wade has just said, like the governance, the board of directors, all that stuff has to come next before we take that final leap of going out looking for somebody. Am I on the right page or what? It's like an interim step. Yeah, we agree. We got to move forward. But after that next step, we got to find out a little bit more how we're going to proceed. But we got to do it fairly rapidly.
I guess I don't need that. Well, you can't go to the next step until you have the other communities involved. Am I correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so in order to try and get the train moving down the track, given the conversation that we've had, I would suggest that perhaps the resolution have another condition. We have a condition about the agreement of the other two parties, but if you added another condition on there that that's conditional upon all three municipal partners agreeing, ratifying bylaw number 1, which that's where all your details are going to be. That's going to be the composition of the board, how many times you report, how quickly you get your RDDSs done, and that would be what the topic of the joint council meeting would be, the meeting of the three councils, to iron out those details, and then they all go back, they ratify those, they all say yes officially in public that they're happy with the terms. That would be the last condition to the funding of the partnership agreement. So you'd have, we all agree in concept. Part 1 is we all agree in principle. Part 2 is we've all ratified bylaw number 1. And then now you've effectively, you've set aside the money. You've agreed to the rules of the game. Now the CAOs can run off and start building stuff and based on the rules of the game that were agreed to by the three parties. And that would allow us to keep this moving, but fully knowledgeable, but there are still changes and discussions that need to be had.
I think you probably have summarized it. I think we're all on the same page, but we just need that clarification before we make this first step. Big step is, yep, we're going to move. Now from here on in, the work begins. And we've got to see that fairly rapidly, so.
I mean, I know, Jeff, you already shared that, pretty much the same scenario. We kind of changed it up a little bit here, but it is in principle right now to let them know that we're game. That's where we're at.
They're waiting for us to make a decision.
Do you want to say something? I'm going to go to Councilor Heiss up here, sorry.
Yeah, get a turn. So. I like that idea because I think we're just agreeing in principle, and I don't think you're going to have three communities agree with all these conditions anyway. I think another council, when they have to agree to this, are going to have the same concerns and the same things. So I think we have to sit down and iron that bylaw 1 out anyway, right? I don't think everybody's going to be on the same page. You're not going to get 3 people to agree to it, let alone 3 councils with all their council members. So I think that's a good way to proceed. At least we get the ball rolling, and it's almost like a direction to get this going and proceed. And then at the end, and there'll be probably another resolution at the end saying, okay, we got all this in place to agree to the bylaws and that, and then it's all done. So I think that's a good way to do it. Yeah.
That's where I was before we came in here tonight.
Yeah. Me either, right? So.
Okay. Councilor Greenlaw, sorry.
So that's great. I like that. Just to follow up though, with the communication and transition and some type of a plan with future St. Stephen, I'd like to hear a commitment to that as well, so that nobody's left hanging. No developer says, well, they're not providing the service anymore, and I don't know who to call, because you guys are moving to a new model and so on and so forth, right? So I want to make sure that there's no gaps, everybody gets service there. So that's a commitment I'd like to have. I don't know if that's Jeff does that, or who commits to that.
I can certainly commit to trying to figure out that transition path. That's not a problem. I'm kind of, as the mayor kind of indicated, I was kind of stuck between discussions that we've had in the past and closed that I didn't have authority to speak out of. Now we're having a conversation in open, which makes my world a lot easier as far as being able to sit down with people and say, okay, here's what I've got, and figure out timelines and pass it. Yeah, today makes things a lot easier on a lot of fronts in my office for sure.
Councilor Otis?
And the last thing is we just need to remember that, of course, the other two communities are going to be game based on the simple fact that future St. Stephen was really, we kind of led the region in developing something very unique here around economic development that has been admired by other communities. So it's just important to remember that there are people who want to be engaged that are local to economic development. And when you have community members saying, I want to be a part of this, but I feel like nobody wants me to be a part of it, it's just about with that transition plan, talking about ways that they can still give feedback and be involved in just sharing their perspectives on economic development, because we really are the only community who's had something so unique like that. So that's where the care, I think, comes into play, just based on the simple fact that St. Andrews and St. George have not had their own unique economic development. I mean, they've had synergy, correct? However, this is kind of like a spin-off, like we kind of led that charge. So those people that led the charge in the beginning need to feel like they didn't start something amazing for it to be passed off to something better, but rather they started something amazing that they can continue to be a part of. It just will look a little bit different, and having that conversation.
Remember, this is for 3 years. You're stuck for 3 years unless all three groups gets together and say they want to dissolve it. So if it goes well, excellent. If it goes not so well, we're stuck with it for 3 years. So we want to make sure we start into it right.
I thought we could bail after a year.
After the first 3 years, I think you can. I might have.
No, you're 100% correct. It's a non-termination period of 3 years, just to allow the thing to develop and grow and have a chance to prove itself before it gets scuttled. So.
Fail. I don't want any part of it, so I guess I'm optimistic it's going to be good. Yeah, go ahead, Councilor.
Do we have to change the resolution then for the wording on that a little bit before? Because I did put it forward, or I did.
Yeah. If you wanted to go with the recommendation that I put on the floor, which was be that subject to the agreement of the other two parties, and subject to the bylaw number 1 being ratified by all 3 municipal partners.
So I moved that. So I agree with that wording, and I'm fine to move ahead.
Councilor Eastman, can you read it? Because you might as well read it where you got it right in front of you. I don't have it in front of me.
The council approve the within memorandum of understanding (brackets partnership agreement) as presented, subject to approval by the other 2 parties named therein, and subject to bylaw number 1 being ratified by all 3 municipal partners.
Okay. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. It's not an easy decision to make, but but we do. There's always time for change too. I was part of that group, by the way, and I'm very proud of the group was there, and I hope that the members of that group that are still interested would work alongside with this. It's just another name, just a different hat. But anyways, we'll see how she rolls out, and I hope so. All right. Offer of services, Bud Avenue Extension. I need a mover and seconder that council authorized proceeding with the offer of service as outlined in Dillon Consulting Limited correspondence dated September 6, 2024 and May 29, 2024, attached here too, with the required municipal portion to be paid from the municipal reserves. Mover and seconder, please. Councilor Wright, Councilor Greenlaw. Any questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Whew. Now, I need a mover and seconder for the that pursuant to Section 68, Bracket 1, the Local Governments Act, the council moved to a closed session for the purpose of discussing one personal matter. And that's it. Councilor Wright, did I hear you, Councilor Cornish? Yeah, Councilor Cornish. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, we are now moving into closed.